Well, we're going to continue our message series through the Sermon on the Mount. We took a little bit of a pause last week for Easter, and I'm just really excited to introduce the person who's going to be teaching this morning is Garrett Shelp. There you are.
Here I am.
He brought his fan club this service.
Yeah, you know.
Which is always very loud and enthusiastic group of lots of people. Garrett, if you don't know, Garrett was a part of our staff and our team here at Christ Church for 10 years.
Yeah.
Garrett and I have known each other for a really long time, since you were in high school, and I was just like only a little bit older than you. So that's how I want to remember our relationship.
That's a fair assessment.
And he's going to teach this morning, but first I said, Garrett, tell us also about what you're doing. Garrett is one of our mission partners that we support as he and Lindsay and their family. About 3 years ago, when they moved from Flagstaff, God called them to Washington, to the suburbs of Seattle, to do ministry with Young Life and to share the gospel with students there. And it's just amazing what he's doing. And just they're going to be in the hospitality room after service. You want to hear more or get their newsletters or join their team of supporters and people who pray for them. But so glad you're here.
Thank you.
The sermon last service was awesome, and it's going to bless you. But also just give us some Young Life update.
I will. Thank you, Chris. So it's hard to follow those wonderful people, because they're actually going to be like real missionaries, to like a far, like they have to stretch, and I'm like, I'm in the suburbs, so I do get that tension. Thanks for making me follow that. But I want to say this, Young Life, the reason I was drawn to it is I've spent the last 20 years of my life just investing in and learning about youth ministry. And Young Life, what drew me to it as an organization is that it has one singular mission, and that is to introduce, everyone say the word introduce. Introduce an adolescent, a student to Jesus, and to help them grow in their faith. And I was drawn to that because of the simplicity of that. The reason I had you say introduce is because we're not a church. We're not another youth group. We're not trying to gather a bunch of kids who already go to other places to find faith or encouragement or inspiration. We're trying to say, as in Young Life they say, we go to the furthest out kids. We try to find ways to connect with kids that would not find themselves connected to Christian community or learn about the message and the person of Jesus. So we try to do things. And to do that, we get a little silly, we get a little weird, we do crazy events. Where I live in Seattle, what makes this opportunity so unique is that we live in a densely populated suburb in the North Shore School District. And we've got a bunch of kids whose parents are very wealthy, have big homes, a bunch of white kids who are just bored. And we create these events that allow them not only to come, but also to bring friends. They know it'll be safe and that they're going to get something out of it. The other thing about my area that's so unique is that there's one high school in particular in our neighborhood, North Creek High School, that is 50% Indian American kids. 50%. So we live in a very blended community with a large Asian American and Indian population mixed with white. And so what excites me to no end is when I meet and get to connect with families, the generational impact that could be for a kid who's just heard about Jesus for the first time. No church history, no Bible history. It is astounding. So here's some silly pictures. This is me with one of our kids who graduated in the last year. His name's Levi, and he's trained to be a firefighter. And we had a little race, so who can put on the fire suit. It took me an hour. It took him like 13 seconds. It was awesome. I looked like a goof, but what we do with kids is we visit them. We stay in touch with them. We do what's called contact work. This is the team of leaders, most of them, that I have in my area. These are the people who go to a school and they just volunteer at lunch. A lot of us today are talking about, gun violence and drug abuse and the way schools feel more unsafe than ever before. And do you know what helps change that? Is when random people like us just volunteer and show up at a high school and just stand around at lunch and go, I'm gonna get to know 10 kids' names today. That's it. And that's what these people do. They host amazing clubs. They lead Bible studies. They're just wonderful people. This is us at a baptism event after camp. 4 boys want to get baptized. 3 of them are in a small group with me. There's Jacob, there's Cole, and then there's Leighton. And these are just wonderful boys. They're so incredible. And then this is us at camp. It was not Christmas when we had camp. It was July, but we do like a Christmas night to get the kids all wild and fun and do like a Christmas dinner. So you could, because I'm in a sweater, I think you could just smell this picture from where you're sitting. Do you know what I mean? And then this is us in beautiful Canada. So there's a camp property called Malibu that Young Life owns. If any of you know the famous author Bob Goff, his house is like right behind us. And this is just where we go and play and have fun and make memories with kids and tell them and introduce them to who Jesus is. These are all upperclassmen boys that I had the privilege of leading just 2 summers ago. And that's me as a leprechaun just a couple weeks ago. Because sometimes to make sure that kids feel welcome, we don't just preach. We don't just tell them there's all these rules in the Bible. We just show up and we play silly games. And those are real Lucky Charms in my beard. Because I had to be a leprechaun, Lawrence the leprechaun, who had to eat as many Lucky Charms and compete with other kids as possible. And I did it. This is me dressed, again, like another nincompoop. This is a character I created called Caden. He's every Gen Z junior high school boy you've ever met. And this is us at a giant event for middle school kids, and we had 200 kids show up. 200 kids. And you know why? Because nobody's doing things like this where we live. And so it's just been the most fun. And my favorite part about this night is I got to meet one of these amazing girls' dads. His name is Rakesh. So I'm at the event. I look like the goof that I look like, right? Like, I don't know if I'm playing on a poker tournament or I'm doing taxes. I don't know what's up with my hat. But I go and I meet this dad, Rakesh, and I hear a parent say, hey, there's a dad who wants to talk to you. And I don't know if you know, but that's the worst sentence you could ever hear in youth ministry. Absolutely the worst. There's nothing worse. So I go up to him and he goes, hi, I'm Rakesh and my daughter's here. This is wonderful. I've never seen anyone do something like this for kids in our community for free. And I'm like sweating and I'm like, yeah, for free. And he looks at me and he goes, do you guys have like summer camp things you do? And I was like, this is why we do this. Like this dad has never heard of what we do or why we exist. And I just am so pleased to know that family. There is a kid inside that panda snowman right there. We had to figure out competition who could make a snowman the fastest. And then this is a character I play. It's just famous where I live. And if you've ever seen Martin Short do the character Jiminy Glick, it's basically my version of that. And so on and so forth. So if you guys want to hear more about what we do, if you want to consider even joining the team, my wife and I will be over here at a little station in the hospitality room. We'd love to connect with you. And for a lot of you, just say thank you for your support and your love. I'm so honored. Now, insert sermon transition right here. I'm gonna be really honest with you. If I was in your seat right now and you knew you were about to hear a sermon that was about forgiveness, I would check out. And I would check out because, from my perspective, this is a sermon I've heard before. You've all heard about forgiveness. You know Jesus talks about it a lot, all right? And not only that, but for a lot of us in this room, I would imagine, like, yeah, I'm good. I've got my people forgiven. I'm good. I'm forgiven. I love Jesus. I'm good. And I think for a lot of us, the longer we are a Christian, the more we check out. Because we've heard these verses. We've heard these stories. And I want to just maybe poke at you a little bit and ask you to pay attention as long as you can. Because I want to talk about forgiveness in maybe a little more brutally honest way. That has been my story and my experience. Because I believe that for a lot of us, we shove this topic under the rug. It feels like it's a done deal. And so if nothing else happens today, I just want you to feel deeply again a conviction inside of you to go back to a troubling relationship, knowing that you have the unlimited power of God available to you through forgiveness. And if nothing else happens, I hope you'll just feel that conviction again about how important this really is. So to do that, I want us to read a story that happened in Jesus' life. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus over for a meal. He went to the Pharisee's house and sat down at the dinner table. Just then, a woman of the village. What a title. You ever been called a woman of the village before? Maybe the dude of the village. The town harlot, having learned that Jesus was a guest in the home of the Pharisee, came with a bottle of very expensive perfume and stood at his feet weeping, raining tears on his feet. Letting down her hair, she dried his feet, kissed them, and anointed them with perfume. This is a very first century Jewish custom of love and gratitude and honor. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "Self, if this man was the prophet I thought he was, he would have known what kind of woman this is who's falling all over him." Jesus said, "Simon, I have something to tell you." Simon says, "Oh, tell me." Two men were in debt to a banker, Jesus said. One owed 500 silver pieces, the other 50. Neither of them could pay up. And so the banker canceled both debts. Which of the two would be more grateful? Now pause the story right now. I hope you're all doing a little arithmetic, a little math in your head. Which one do you think was more grateful? I hope you get the answer right. Here we go. Simon answered, I suppose it's the one who was forgiven the most. Did any of you guess that? Great job, good job. Exactly, well done. So I knew you'd get it, I knew it. That's right, Jesus said, turning to the woman then, but speaking to Simon, he said, do you see this woman? I came into your home and you provided no water for my feet, but she rained tears on my feet and dried them with her hair. You gave me no greeting, but from the time I arrived, she hasn't quit kissing my feet. You provided nothing for freshening up, but she has soothed my feet with perfume. Impressive, isn't it? She was forgiven many, many sins, and so she is very, very grateful. If the forgiveness is minimal, the gratitude is minimal. This is a story that happens in Jesus' life, but it does not happen in the Sermon on the Mount. You have, as a church, we as a church family have been going through the Jesus way, Jesus' teachings, kind of line by line, his most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. And I wanted to open with that story because it is Jesus doing what he always does. He teaches something somewhere else, and then he models it somewhere else. He brings it to life, he exemplifies it, he puts flesh and blood on it. And that's what this story is. Jesus has already taught something in the Sermon on the Mount about forgiveness, and then this story happens, and it kind of gives legs to it all. I also wanted to open with this story because although we're looking at Jesus' most famous sermon, I wanted you to see Jesus' way, his method of always adding layers to what he taught. It's always a layered understanding, interconnecting with our life to another person's and God's when Jesus teaches, especially when it comes to forgiveness. When Jesus talks about forgiveness, he never brings up that idea as one transactional situation. He brings it up as a multifaceted expression. This is just the Jesus way. And since we are on the heels of Easter Sunday, which I heard last week, and you had a wonderful spring day celebration in the blizzard winter snow of April. The story of Jesus is of a man who fully surrendered himself to God in trust. This makes him simultaneously both the most powerful and most vulnerable. I mean, think about your own journey of faith. Isn't it true in the moments of your life that have required the deepest trust in God? Were both simultaneously this moment that you felt powerful and carried, you had an energy behind you, and yet you also felt exposed, vulnerable, and woundable. That is the story of Jesus. That is your story with Jesus. This full surrender eventually put Jesus into great suffering and death, but it also led to God raising him from the dead as the wounded healer of the world. This is a significant ideological point we have to settle on, especially after Easter, because we can't understand what he teaches in the Sermon on the Mount, especially forgiveness, without remembering who he was, that he modeled this, that he trusted God so profoundly and surrendered himself so fully. See, when Jesus teaches, he doesn't just give us a special twist on a topic. He is the great revealing of how everything works. And so what I want us to do is look here. This is the teaching Jesus gives in the Sermon on the Mount and today's 2 verses. And it's Jesus expounding upon something he taught in what's called the Lord's Prayer, or as I grew up learning it, the Our Father, right? And what's interesting about the Our Father is Jesus goes through teaching this prayer and how to pray, and he doesn't elaborate on any of the lines in the prayer except the one that has to do with forgiveness. I mean, I would have loved to elaborate on a couple more lines, like, kingdom come, will be done. Tell me more about that. Or when he says, lead us not to temptation, deliver us from evil. I'd like to know a little more details and nuances about that, because my life feels riddled with trial and temptation. I don't know about you, but the one that Jesus said, I want to give a few more thoughts about, was the one about forgiveness. So he said these words, right in the smack middle of the Sermon on the Mount. Do you know what that means to Jewish people? If it's in the middle of your talk, it's the most important thing you're about to say. That's interesting. He says, if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. There's a couple of ways to kind of read this passage and interact with it. One way to read this verse is to see it as kind of like a math equation. If you forgive, you get forgiveness. If you don't forgive, you don't get forgiveness. Very simple math, not hard to confuse. Another way to read this is to see it as, hey, if you're a Christian, you don't get a choice on the topic of forgiving people. You just do it or else, right? And you can hear the threat in there. There is a way to read this like it's a threat to you. Hey, you better do this or you're going to be in big trouble. And I want to say this with great clarity. Indeed, Jesus is not messing around here. There are serious threats to all of us by not taking forgiveness seriously the way Jesus does. And Jesus presents consequences with eternal ramification. But you see, these two lines right here, they're not the fullness of everything Jesus said about forgiveness in the Gospels, and certainly not in his life. And they are not the fullness of what he says consistently about forgiveness. The problem with seeing these two lines as if they are kind of all-encompassing, I just should go obey this and do it, is that it misses the masterful art that is the great teacher of Jesus. He's elaborating on verse 12, where it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And Jesus felt like this one line in his prayer needed this amendment, this clarity. Why is that? I think, in my opinion, it's because of this. Your most significant relationships will always require the hardest forgiveness. I mean, that was absolutely true in Jesus' day. 2,000 years ago, Jesus used stories to tell people about the relationships they were in. He would tell parables and stories about fathers and sons and mothers and daughters. He would tell stories about managers and employees. No forgiveness required in that relationship, right? He would tell stories about brides and grooms and even rich relatives and poor relatives, right? Now, I don't know if you've ever had a loved one pass away and everyone's just, oh, and then someone starts talking about a will. And all of a sudden, those tears are gone, aren't they? And it's all about, oh, they always liked you more anyways, nah, you know. And Jesus, I mean, this was true 2,000 years ago. Did you know that 2,000 years ago, people lived together multi-generationally in the same home in a war-torn environment? Jesus knew that these people understood strain and tension. I mean, think about your life for a minute. Think about your significant relationships and how they have asked of you a lot on the topic of forgiveness, haven't they? I mean, being married for any amount of time, how much forgiveness is required in that little arrangement? You ever been a roommate with somebody, right? Have you ever had a family member, friend? You know, I want to spend a minute because what's really personal and real to me and what I wanted to share with you today is I want to take a minute and just talk about our families, particularly our parents, the parents that we came from. I mean, for some of us, when we talk about our parents, it is like a wonderful memory lane. It is like remembering how good they were, how beautiful they were. For some of us, remembering our parents is so welcome. It's a beautiful picture we look back on, and I hope that we get to continue to create something like that for our own kids and grandkids. And maybe for you, it's like if they're alive, you just think, oh, how great that I get to call them on the phone, be with them, and tell them I love them. And for some of us who our parents are gone, you know, our mindset is, gosh, I miss them. They meant so much to me. I want to carry their legacy. For some of us in this room, our parents are a brilliant reminder of why we go to counseling every other week. And our prayer that insurance continues to cover the difference. See, our parents and our journey with the home we came from, it reveals a dark truth that we really don't like to name or carry with us in our world. And that is that the places of our deepest hurts originate in the place we knew to be home and the place we believed was safest. It is absolutely impossible. And I think this is what Jesus is trying to say by putting forgiveness in clarity front and center, that it is impossible to deal with real life, to deal with your parents as they age, and your family and your life as it ages and grows and goes through seasons. It's impossible to deal with them well without wrestling with forgiveness. And I believe this has been true for 2,000 years, and it could not even be more true for us anymore. Families knew what it was like back then to be strained, and so do you and I, don't we? I believe that Jesus knows how the universe really works, and he's trying to guide us in his most famous sermon on how to live in the real world, your real life. For me, I came to that truth, not just because the Bible told me it was true, but I came to face it in my own life head on. I used to read Jesus' words here about forgiving. Go forgive them and you'll get forgiven. I saw them like a commandment. I used to see it as, hey, I'm going to go forgive, and then I've got it checked off my list so I can be a good Christian. I don't know if you guys have ever tried to forgive somebody when you feel forced to do it, but it doesn't quite work. It's kind of like trying to convince yourself every year, this time of year, that you love doing taxes. You know, sure, you can get better at it and you'll remind yourself, you're like, oh boy, here we go again. But you know, if left to our own, we would never do them again. Have you ever tried to tell little kids and force them to say sorry to their sibling? Have you ever tried that? Sure, I can make my daughter hug my son, and you say sorry, and she goes, sorry, and her teeth are gritting. Like, I can make her do that, but left to her own, she would have eaten him a long time ago. You know? A long time ago. And so I think Jesus means more for us than just go do the forgiveness. Go say you forgive them and move along. But that's how we see it. And that's why a lot of us check out on these sermons, because we don't want to think of it any deeper than that, because our hurts are very real. They're very, very real. And I understand that today, many of you could be sitting here saying, Garrett, I know what you're about to do next. You're about to spend the next part of your sermon going around telling me about all the ways I should just go forgive somebody, but you don't understand my story. You don't understand the hurt that's been done to me. Sure, you're a young man, you're 30, whatever you are, and you've got your life. I get it, you get to talk. I hope you have fun playing with the kids, but my hurt is real. And I could never forgive them. And let me just tell you, I feel your anguish. I see you. I don't know your situation personally, but I know the frustration and the struggle inside of you. See, I had to face this situation because I grew up with a dad who was both physically and mentally abusive. And I grew up in a situation where from that time as a young kid till 18, I had this man that was explosive and that was hostile and difficult to be with. And I can tell you that I was ready to cut him off. I was ready to move on with my life. Boy, I had plans. Let me tell you, I was 27 years old, 10 years ago, and I was excited. I'd met this woman, and she eventually became my wife. Woohoo! And I had a great time. I was in my prime as a pastor here at this church, and I was just woohoo, just talking, flipping out the kids' events, and I was having a great time. And I had moved on from my dad. I said, you know what? I'm going to create healthy boundaries. And I'm going to model emotional mental health. I'm not going to put up with that anymore. We're going to teach abusive people like that not to be that way. And I had all these outcomes in my mind. Now, sure, I had forgiven him. I'd said, I forgive my dad. And I also prayed in my heart that maybe one day my dad would come to me and say, Garrett, I'm sorry. I screwed up. I was not good. I asked you to forgive me. And in my head, I had it all rehearsed. I was going to say, Dad, I forgive you. And God forgives you too, but I'll never trust you. And you know what? I don't know what our relationship would be like. I don't know if you feel this for your situation, but there's a fiery justice in me. It's like, yeah, that would have been right. He should know there are consequences. But then there I was at 27 years old, and one day I got a phone call. And my dad, at the ripe age of 56, suffered either one massive stroke or multiple strokes. And he became handicapped mentally and physically. And my dad is now in a place where he has become a child. And I'm now found myself in a situation where my dad can't even speak well. He can't even articulate. He's mentally not cognizant of the nuances and layers to life like we have the privilege of being here. Real life did not lead me to the outcome I thought of me checking the forgiveness box and moving along. No, instead, life put me face to face with him. I had to at one point live with him and change him and bathe him and help him eat. I had to jump through mental gymnastics. I don't know if you've ever tried to put someone on Medicaid, but the mental gymnastics and Arizona long-term care, thank God for it. But the journey that was, and I had to be face-to-face with him all the time. My wife and I, since 2015, we've moved him 9 times to different facilities and places for his care. I say this to say my image of how this was gonna work and how this all made sense, man, it was not what reality gave me. And I had to face something, and that was my dad will never be able to look at me and say, will you forgive me? So what am I gonna do now? I don't get the cute Christian movie Hallmark card ending to this situation. And yet Jesus' words were for me. You guys, Jesus knows how the universe works. We can trust him. He invites us. Hear me today. I'm not telling you to just go forgive somebody and move on. In today's message, I'm asking you to realize that the Jesus way on forgiveness is a path to living in your real life. My hope today is that through this message, if nothing else happens, you would deeply feel again the conviction to handle a troubling relationship in your life with the infinite power of God through forgiveness, because it's the only way you're gonna actually be in your real life with those real people who have really hurt you. What I learned is that it was I who needed to forgive so that I could face the reality in front of me. And so I could help someone who needed my help. I'm his only son, his only child. My mom and him had been separated for a long time. It fell to me. His parents were very elderly and old. There was no one else to help him. And you know what? It taught me something. It taught me a reminder that I had needed for a long time, that we are both the forgiver and the forgiven. Because you do realize that in your little story of life, you do realize you're the person that someone else needs boundaries from, right? You do know that, don't you? You do know that you have hurt someone. You do know that, right? I don't like admitting that, because see, when I tell my story, I'm the hero. In my narrative, I'm the hero. Or at a minimum, I'm the victim. And I think for some of us, we have to remember we are both the forgiver and the forgiven. And the reminder of Jesus is, if you want to live in your real life, not a delusional one, and face what needs to be done, some of us are going to miss what God may surprisingly have us do in our lives if we cannot use God's unlimited power available to us through forgiveness. In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus reminds us that we too are someone else's offender. We need his perspective. How could we ever enter into Jesus' way that seems so foreign? So on the screen, what I want to do is just give us my reflective thoughts on 4 ways we could potentially deal with this idea. And they're not comprehensive, and I'm not an expert. I have had the privilege of being in therapy for the last 4-ish years. I've had the privilege of being in an intensive course provided by Young Life through this guy who is integrating psychology, mental health, and ministry practice. I mean, I have these things that have given me an edge, but let me tell you, I'm no expert. All I want to present to you is my reflection on how one could enter into Jesus' way on forgiveness. And I hope you see this as me not telling you, you better go do this today. I just want to invite you to see the Jesus way. And perhaps it could help you actually live in your real life. The first thing is offering forgiveness. For Jesus, we go offer it. He tells the story in the Sermon on the Mount. If you have a grievance with someone, go straight to them. Don't even go to church first. Don't even go to the temple. Go straight, make it right. There's something about the power of, with our words, going to the offender, saying, I forgive you. And by God's help, you might mean it. And you have to work on that. But Jesus invites you to put this first. Because just the way God created the world in Genesis 1, there was nothingness, there was void, and then he spoke into it, and it created a whole new world of possibility and life. We have that same power to speak into a relationship that is void, broken, darkness, and bring light and life out of it. I invite you to think about how you and I can do the very tough thing we don't want to do, because I feel such reluctance in even telling them I forgive them, because I'm not the initiator of the hurt. So why should I be the initiator of the forgiveness? Yeah, I feel you with that. And I don't know what we're going to do about some of our relationships where we're never going to get the sorry we deserve. But Jesus invites you to offer forgiveness. The second thing that happens, I think, after we do that, is we clarify our forgiveness. This is where we begin to verbalize what the hurt actually was. It may not happen in that first conversation, but over time, after offering forgiveness, we need to get to the place where we go to that person and we clarify, this is what I was hurt over. This is the problem. This is the pain. This is the hurt. And you don't just do it with them. Sometimes you need to go do this with a therapist, with a friend, someone in your small group. You need to go clarify the hurt, because you and I think in life we can just carry hurts around and they don't go anywhere. They just stay in there. Kind of like a weird extra, like I don't know what your car trunk looks like, but I've got some random things in there that don't belong. And I just let them roll around, and every once in a while we'll take a sharp turn, like I take a turn at 90 in the school zone, and then I hear clunk, 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 and you go, that's just my old box of, footballs or whatever, and you go, okay, and it's just clunking around in there. But you know what? That's not how things work in our bodies. Your body keeps the score, and whatever is in you that is not transformed will always be transferred somewhere else. So you want to know why your spouse complains that you're not listening? You want to know why your kids think that you're being rude and mean and tough on them? It's because you're transferring pain that someone else gave you. Maybe for a minute, we should take a journey and go clarify the forgiveness we're offering, because there is hurt in there, and if it don't get transformed, it's going to go to someone else. We need to also take the next step, which is accepting forgiveness. That is the moment we talk about boundaries, clarifying conversation. If I am going to know this person longer term, here's what I need to be thinking about doing. And here's how we need to hold this relationship in a new way. We are in the long work of accepting the decision we've made to forgive, despite the ways the hurt may still be real and my frustration ongoing. The art of doing this is that you trust God that forgiveness is the way, the Jesus way. You have to come to acceptance only by absolute trust that God and the way Jesus says this will work, will work. Acceptance is directly related to trust at this moment in our process. Lastly, we just process forgiveness. And do you know when the deadline is on that? Never. We always process our forgiveness as long as we live. This is when we go back to the person in conversation and we constantly live in the new normal with them, whatever that is. And it doesn't happen once, but it happens multiple conversations, multiple times. Boundaries are realized, communication is renewed, and we continue to remember that somewhere in me, yes, I was hurt, but I have found a way by the grace of God through Jesus to live in my real life. One that includes pain, but one that also is allowed to go forward. Is anyone with me? So, something to note about these four things is if you flip them, that's how we prefer to do it. We prefer to process our forgiveness just forever and just sit there and go, I will never forgive it. And we just sit there and we live in our lives and we go, there's no way I'll forgive. I'll never forgive. We have a lot of internal chatter. And so then we eventually kind of work ourselves up to, okay, I probably need to forgive them because if I don't, it's just going to mess up the holidays and it's going to be hard. And we start trying to accept that we're going to forgive them. And then finally clarify, go, okay, I'm going to rehearse the speech. Here's how I'm going to say it, but I'm going to tell them. Am I going to tell them? And then I'm going to forgive them because God told me I had to. And then finally, we go to some weird Starbucks meeting and we offer the forgiveness. Jesus invites you to do it the other way. Offer it. Create the new world and take your time clarifying, accepting, and processing. As we close this time, I just want to leave us with this idea. Jesus once said, I came so that they would have life and have it abundantly. I always read this verse with rose-colored glasses. Like, there's Jesus. He wants to throw Disneyland at me and fast cars and fun, and he wants to give me the best life because I trust him. And actually, the word abundant, you know what it means? It means everything. Jesus says, I have come that you would have real life fully. So that includes pain. I think we read this promise a little backwards. We read it with our American rose-colored glasses that he's going to give me puppies and rainbows in life. But actually, he also says with the puppies comes hardship, relational strain, hurt families. And so we need to remember that Jesus has come to give us real life, and he's giving us the way to have it in reality. I want to end our time by just telling you about someone else, and that's my grandpa. My grandpa is a wonderful man. He just passed away this last Monday on April Fool's. He was 93, and he means the world to me. But the reason I want to tell you about him is because he's the other man in my life as a kid growing up. And it's funny how my grandpa was just this positive presence. I was just magnetized to him, and he to me as I got older. And he was just this positive energy, this wonderful man who just loved me well and treated me well. And it was funny how sometimes when my family and my dad would be in the room with him, my dad would kind of change his behavior a little bit. And so there's some of my grandpa, I just felt connected to him. And something I didn't know until I was late into my 20s. In my whole life, my grandpa never made a speech about it or talked about it. But you know what he said to me? He said, Garrett, I never knew my real dad. And my jaw hit the ground. I said, what? His real dad walked out on him and his family when he was 2 years old. We have one photograph of the man. We have no idea what happened to him. This was before Facebook. We couldn't stalk him. And so we literally had we don't know what happened to him. His last name, my grandfather, therefore my last name is not actually Shelp. It's Charles. I had no idea. Crazy. But we got Shelp from the stepdad who raised my grandpa. My grandpa never made a sermon about forgiveness. He never made a big deal. He was just a man who followed Jesus. He loved God, and he made a decision. At one point, my grandpa told me, I decided long ago to forgive him for what he did because my life was just too good, and I could not handle sitting there and holding that against him. I never got to know him, and you know what? I just forgave him so that I could live my life. And my grandpa, God love him. Now he lived to be 93. He got to know my daughter Thea, my son Jack. There's my grandma looking happier than ever. And my grandpa is just this ball of energy and life that's always been with me. And I want to tell you guys this. I think it's because he merged his life with the Jesus way. He forgave. He spent the rest of his life processing it, dealing with it, growing up, never knowing his real dad, but thankful that he accepted his real life nonetheless. And there's a relationship in your life one day that you're going to need to do the same with. Jesus wants you to have your abundant life. The other day, right before he died, I got to go be with him. I got to tell him how I was so thankful for the ways that he changed the course of his life and not settling for the story, which is, I'm a fatherless boy. And he could have been a grump, he could have been addicted, he could have had all these problems, but instead he just chose to be this happy presence who loved Jesus. And I got to hold his hand and tell him, thank you, because you've changed me because of that too. So whatever happens today, I hope that you will come to see that the unlimited power of God is infused in forgiveness. And if you will trust it, if you will infuse it into your life, the ripple effect will be unlike any you can even measure or predict. God, thank you for this audience and this church. Thank you for the gift of forgiveness you give us and you offer us to live in it all the same. By your help, help us to be that forgiveness to others. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Well, again, so glad you're here. Thank you to Garrett, Lindsay for being here. And if you're new, you have any questions at all or anything we can help you with, we'd love for you to stop in the lobby at our New Year's spot. There's another one where you checked your kids in the area down there. We'd love to just help you in any way we can. And also, there's tons of information about our church. All the events that are happening are in our app. There's also, if you want to get a cool shirt and we can match someday, you can see that on the app. There's a link to buy some merch. We have some job openings, some different positions in our preschool. Somebody do maintenance around our facility. Just some needs we have there. Those are all there as well. So check that out. Next Sunday is Next. And this is a great opportunity. If you have questions, you're trying to figure out what's next in my journey spiritually for me, for my family, what does this church have that could help us grow in a holistic way? That's what Next is about. And so what happens is at the end of each service, you just meet Joy or somebody on the team at the New Year's spot, and you go over next door. We got coffee, donuts, and you just have a conversation. with a small group of people and just learn about what's happening. If you want to know more about faith and baptism and what it means to follow Jesus, that's a part of it as well. And we'd love to just let you know it happens every service. Your kids can stay in childcare afterwards. It's great. And just really easy for you to join us that way and find out what's happening. So I hope you'll do that. When you financially support, when you give your tithes and offerings to Christ Church, you are a part of, like what you saw today, people going to places around the world to share Jesus' love. Where that place is a refugee camp in Algeria, the suburbs of Seattle, both of those are endeavors that you support. We do this together. And I just want to say thank you for all of you who are already a part of that. And for those of you who aren't, I just tell you as your friend, you're the one missing out. And if you would like to join what God is doing in that way, we would love to have you join us. There's all the things that God's doing, he does through our time and our effort, but also our resources. So you see the ways that you can be a part of that on the screen. Last week we gave away books, and it was snowed, so some of you weren't here. And we were really, just had a great time celebrating Easter. We have this book, Is Easter Unbelievable?, answering some really, I think, important questions about our faith, about the events of Easter. So if you want another one, you want to give one to a friend or a few, we have extras in the lobby. If you weren't here and you want to check it out, cruise through there, you just grab them. And I just want to make you aware of that. All right, let's do the last thing. We're going to be friendly. Look for some of you know. Everybody stand up. I've got a really good question. I thought of it all by myself. All right. I know the right answer. Let's see if you get the answer right. Find somebody around you you don't know. You didn't come here with them. And for a couple minutes, talk about this question. What's better, baseball or basketball? They're both happening right now. Have a conversation. Talk to your neighbor.